Well, guys, we're back. NBA season is almost upon us. Begins October 28th with the Spurs taking on the Mavericks. Spurs will be defending their NBA title that they won over the summer against the Miami Heat. Back again with me is my good friend and co-host Jackson Pellingra.
Hello, hello.
We feel better prepared for this installment versus the other two we've done so far.
It's a learning experience the first time. I think we should be better.
Yeah, we should be better, and we'll have
a little more succinct.
Yeah, we should have some nice additions, intro music, and what have you.
All the key features of any good podcast.
So we just want to thank various media outlets for
all of our sponsors, of course.
All of our sponsors for enabling us to bring this to you free and commercial free. And so we'll get right into it. We'll definitely make this shorter than our playoff previews.
Well, there's less to talk about right now.
There's less to talk about. Plus, look, if you listen to all an hour and a half of the Eastern Conference preview,
I'm sorry
the playoffs, all kudos to you. We thank you. And
what are you doing with your life?
You must have had a lot of free time on your hands.
Hey, no, thank you. Anyway.
But thank you. So yeah, we'll get right into it. With the Southeast Division, that's the division with Miami, Washington, Charlotte, Atlanta. Who's our fifth team?
Orlando.
Is it Orlando?
Yes,
it is Orlando.
It is Orlando.
All right, so obviously the Heat was the big story.
The last 4 seasons,
with LeBron James. And over the summer, he decided to head back to his home in Cleveland, and obviously that made huge news.
Disappointing for myself as a Miami fan.
Yeah, disappointing for Heat fans everywhere, but I think everywhere around the league, it was a heartwarming story.
Yeah, it certainly has endeared him back to NBA fans who despised him for the last 4 years, and now overnight it seems like he's been embraced. It's a very brilliant public relations move on his part, and and a solid basketball move as well.
But business to this season. Washington. We're just looking here at a preview from another sports website, and they're listing Washington as the number one team to finish in this division. That's very interesting. I think we both agree that Miami will win this division, but
I think so. But Washington is very interesting. Although the recent news of Beal injuring his wrist, and I think he's out for at least 6 weeks, really dampens their chances. But it's going to be very interesting to see, particularly how Wall progresses, because he's at a point, and we were talking about this before we started, he's at a point where I think he can safely be called one of the young stars of the league, or the up-and-coming stars, but he's really not a bona fide star player yet, and whether he can make that transition from my one arbitrary category to the next is to be seen. But I think if he can do that, they have a legitimate shot at finishing first in the division. But I don't see that happening, and with Beal out, it makes it even harder.
Well, it's one thing if he's out 2-3 months, but he's only out the first 6-8. I say only, but considering how long the season is, the first 6 to 8 weeks would be what?
Well,
you play
a month and a half.
You play 3 or 4 games a week, 5 maybe. So yeah, he's missing about half the season, but
And if the race is close, a few games with him missing could make all the difference. But they did get a significant addition in Paul Pierce, who
more of a leadership pickup, I think. Obviously, he's probably only has 1-2 more years left.
yeah, but it's important to note that he was fairly productive for Brooklyn. He certainly didn't have the drop off that his former comrade Kevin Garnett did, who just was a shell of himself, and it was almost hard to watch him play.
Right.
Where he's still a semi-productive veteran player. They did lose Trevor Ariza though, so that'll hurt him slightly, but I feel they have the best shot of giving the Heat a run. And speaking of the Heat, they had quite a bit of turnover on their roster, picking up Luol Deng, Josh McRoberts, and then Shabazz Napier in the draft. What do you think about the Heat's additions?
Certainly, I mean, as a Gator fan, I'm not the biggest Napier fan, but he's tough as nails. He's very. I mean, he's obviously quick with the ball. He's a shoot first point guard, which I mean, he's obviously not going to come in and start over Chalmers, but he can certainly provide some good, I could see him providing, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes a game.
Yeah, and he's also
in the backcourt.
One of the rookies who seems to be ready to play right now, ready to contribute to a playoff team, which is what I think. I mean, he drafted him pretty much because of LeBron's wishes, thinking that might be another incentive for him to stay there. Obviously, that didn't work out, but I still think it was a really good pick for a late first-round pick.
And Luol Deng, I mean, I've always loved him I liked him when he played at Duke. Back when I was a Bulls fan, I still am a Bulls fan, but he's always been one of those guys that I feel like just hasn't gotten the credibility and the notoriety that he's deserved over his career. He's been a consistent 15 plus points per game performer.
Mm-hmm.
He's a big small forward.
He's a very solid third option for any team to have.
Right.
Now it didn't quite work out with him in Cleveland, but there was a whole bunch of instability there anyway.
Yeah, he was only there half the season.
So I think that can sort of be written off. So we agreed that the Wizards and the Heat will be vying for the top spot, with the Heat most likely prevailing, although it's a little bit uncertain whether Bosch can move back to being the one again, or the number one option on the team again. I think he can, because I think he proved it in Toronto that he could. I mean, he took a couple of pretty below average teams to the playoffs. But a really interesting team is Charlotte, who obviously made the playoffs last year and made some pretty big acquisitions in the offseason.
Well, I'd say they made one. Lance Stevenson, signed him from Indiana. I'm not completely sold on Noah Vonleh, first round pick out of Indiana.
I mean, he's not likely to contribute this year,
no,
regardless of how his career turns out. So,
but they did bring back Marvin Williams, formerly of Atlanta. I believe he was drafted by Charlotte, and he pretty much replaced Josh McRoberts, who signed elsewhere.
Miami.
Signed with Miami. Yeah, I mean, I think Charlotte, give Michael Jordan all the flack you want, but he was able to, I guess, position this team for success. Obviously, last year they made the playoffs.
I mean, it's about time.
Yeah.
They've been pretty atrocious
Right.
for most of his tenure there. But yeah, no, they've got young guys. Kemba Walker's coming into his own. Obviously, Al Jefferson was a a steal for what they got him for.
Right.
So I mean, you can't really call it a team that made the playoffs last year a sleeper team, but they definitely have a talented roster.
And I think we must mention that the Eastern Conference, at least in my opinion, is much better top to bottom.
Oh yeah, you can't even debate that.
Much better top to
Especially
bottom.
the Southeast
this season,
which has been one of the worst divisions in basketball for the last few years. It might have become the best division in the Eastern Conference, with the teams we talked about already, and Al Horford coming back for the Hawks,
right?
Who are another team that really could contend to make the playoffs, but they've just got a few strong teams in front of them.
And the sort of, and we were talking about this before we came on, the Hawks signed Thabo Cephalosha. That was news to me. I hadn't heard that. So he provides, obviously his trademark is defense.
Yeah.
But he has the ability to shoot, and he's played on winning teams, so I think you got to throw that in there with Oklahoma City. So he has that experience going for him. And then the drafting of Adrian Payne too. He really sort of halfway through the season at Michigan State, he developed an outside shot and was making it with some pretty good consistency. So I feel like that upped his draft stock, and I think he's going to be. I think he's going to be on the all-rookie team.
It's a possibility. He definitely has a chance to contribute this season.
Right.
Although, at the position he's at power forward, I can't imagine he'll get that many minutes with Horford returning. But I think, he'll definitely have a chance to make a name for himself.
And then bringing up the rear, I guess our local team, while we've been in school, has been the Orlando Magic. First of all, I was, even going back to last season, I was kind of skeptical of their choice to sign Jacques Vaughn as their head coach. I obviously didn't think that was the best choice for them, considering he's only been out of the league for maybe 2 or 3 years prior to that.
I think that may have been more of a necessity than who they would have actually wanted if they could get a coach.
Right.
Because I imagine they contacted people like Jeff Van Gundy. I would imagine they gave him a call.
Seems like Jeff Van Gundy's in every single rumor for head coaching positions, but
and a lot of those sort of known veteran coaching commodities. I would imagine that a lot of them probably don't want to spend 3 to 5 years developing guys before they can even contend, especially if they've been on playoff or they've headed up playoff teams in the past. But, I mean, it's important to say that the Magic probably have a very bright future in front of them. We both think that they drafted very well, particularly for me, Peyton, who was, I think, a steal where they got him.
And he's got a chip on his shoulder. Played at a small D1 school in Louisiana.
That chip.
I believe it was Louisiana Monroe or Lafayette. One of the two.
One of the two. But yeah, there's not much to say about them this year. They're going to be bad. They're not going to make any noise for the playoffs, despite what some Orlando talk radio hosts would have you believe. But yeah, they have things to look forward to, but probably not with Jacques Vaughn as the coach in that future. I think most people think.
Kind of sad for Magic fans, I guess, to see Jameer Nelson leave.
He's
sort of been a mainstay, their mainstay point guard since he was drafted in, I believe, 04 or 05. something like that. So he had been in the system for quite a while.
It's bittersweet though because he does get to go to a team that's most likely going to be a playoff team
Right.
in Dallas.
Right.
So you have to feel
But
happy for
I
him.
mean, Magic fans have certainly grown to love Victor Oladipo.
Yeah, he's
great to watch in college, obviously, and he's carried that on to the pro ranks. Um, so if you're looking for high flies, high flying dunks and just complete athleticism, probably one of the best athletes um, in the NBA right now.
and Aaron Gordon is also a freak
yeah,
athlete
yeah,
coming in there.
Yeah, I was going to go into that next. I mean, Aaron Gordon from Arizona, top 10 pick. Just I think he's just scratching the surface of where he's going to end up. I feel like he could have used another year in college, but
But
that's
you can't blame a guy.
Yeah.
And we could talk for quite a while on
Not that he isn't mentally ready. I feel like he could have used another season to
develop his shot.
Develop.
But he'll have plenty of minutes to develop on
Yeah.
that. I think he'll get a good amount of playing time.
Right.
So I think we can agree that the Magic will be a fun team to watch even when they're being blown out by 30.
And their fans, give credit to their fans. They continue to show up, and their arena's one of the nicest in the league. It's one of the newest arenas, and especially when half decent teams come in, it's compelling to see how they match up against those teams. So on to the Atlantic Division. Oh wait, so we're doing top five in that division. So I think you and I both agreed with Miami being one,
Yeah.
Washington 2. Who are we going to say? Charlotte 3 or Atlanta 3?
It's difficult. It really is difficult, but I think
I would give the edge to Charlotte.
yeah, particularly I know Stevenson obviously has his behavioral problems, but he's a very significant addition, and he'll definitely fit right in with their strong defensive culture they have there. So yeah, I'd pick them to finish third, but it's difficult to say because I really like Al Horford as a player, so him coming back, it's difficult. But yeah, I think we'll go Charlotte 3, Atlanta 4, and then Magic in the cellar.
I mean, let's be clear. I mean, it's not like the NFL where the winner of each division gets in the playoffs and it's 2 wild cards or 1 wild card spot, whatever. It's the top 8 teams from each conference. So really the divisions are there just for geographical purposes and things of that nature. But in reality, it's the top 8 teams in each conference. So
well, yeah, everybody makes the playoffs in the NBA, so
yeah, well,
conceivably
it seemed like
you could see 3 playoff teams out of the Southeast.
right.
4
Possibly 4.
4 would be quite a stretch, although the division we're about to talk about, the Atlantic, is pretty damn bad.
Yeah.
But I'd say 3 is probably a safe bet.
Yeah.
So anyway,
so we'll move on to the Atlantic Division with Toronto, Brooklyn, New York, Boston, and we keep forgetting these 15. Philadelphia.
The Sixers. It's easy to understand why we would forget them. So this division, like I just said, is probably the worst in all of basketball. I mean, when you have a team like the Knicks as not the worst team in the division, you're probably pretty bad.
That's your Heat bias coming in there.
Well, I mean, the Knicks are not going to be good this year.
Well, I mean, and we'll get into that. Made an interesting signing for their head coach. They fired Mike Woodson and brought in Derek Fisher, who was actually playing in the playoffs over the summer for Oklahoma City. But it's certainly a coach that a lot of people have tipped to join the coaching ranks, and for him to get his first head coaching job, not even assistant coach or anything, he's thrown into the fire early.
That's how much Phil Jackson trusts him.
Yep.
But I don't know how much of a difference he can make.
But I think when you have Carmelo Anthony, who's one of the top players in the league, I think you're going to at least contend for a playoff spot.
Sure, and especially in a bad division.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I exaggerate a little on how bad they are.
Bad conference, you mean?
Well, no.
'Cause, I mean, division.
No, I mean, they'll get to beat up on...
Well, yeah.
Philadelphia and Boston.
Yeah, they'll play
two of the worst teams in the league.
They'll play the Sixers and Boston more times than because they're in the same division.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
But anyway, as for the top of the division, I think it just goes to Toronto because they really haven't had any significant changes to their roster. Obviously, they had their nice, not really a run, but they had some excitement for their fans last year in the playoffs. And they're still an extremely young team.
And I think if we're handing out certainly the most vocal and loudest fans, I think Toronto's up there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what metric we'd use to measure that, but yeah, their fans were up there with Portland and Golden State fans last year.
Oklahoma City.
Yeah, gotta throw them in there. But yeah, there's not really much to say about them. They should be a slightly better version of last year's team because not much changed. Yeah, the only person gone for them of any significance is John. Is it Salmons or Salmons? Because I want to say...
I've heard it both ways.
Yeah.
I think it's Salmons.
Okay, so Salmons.
But they re-signed Kyle Lowry, who was rumored to be going to the Lakers.
Rumored to be going to a bunch of places.
A bunch of places.
Yeah.
But they were able to re-sign him, and obviously DeMar DeRozan is kind of their, sort of the.
He's the young face.
Yeah, he's the figurehead of the Raptors organization right now, for his athleticism and just. I mean, he's honestly
he's a freak.
He's a much better. He's turned out to be a much better player in his first couple of years in the NBA than I thought he would be coming out of USC.
And then the other young guys, Terrence Ross,
right.
Valanciunas, another guy who doesn't really get a lot of recognition for them, partly because he's in Toronto. But those are guys, who should be slightly better versions of themselves than they were last year. So I think that Toronto will win this division quite comfortably, considering Brooklyn's losses.
Right.
Obviously, Brooklyn was the geezer team last year, and they've lost some of their old guys, but they're still pretty old, and it's hard to imagine they'll make a run at Toronto with Pierce gone, Blatch gone, Livingston gone. Do you think that they have any shot at challenging to win the division?
No, I think Toronto's. I think Toronto is the clear favorite in the Atlantic. I just something about last season just didn't feel right to me, and it kind of culminated with them losing in the first round and effectively trading Jason Kidd to the Bucks. I just thought that whole situation, and it pretty much started with the season prior to that with them firing PJ Carlesimo, which I felt he did a pretty good job when he took over.
Well, they did have a lot of injuries to take into account.
Right.
And that's what they started extremely slowly. And they did lose Lopez. So him being back, will give them something. But I think their losses are pretty significant. I mean, a good amount of their scoring from last year is gone.
But I certainly think with the amount of cap, with the amount of money they've spent on free agent acquisitions and things of that nature, um, you have Darren Williams running the point. You have Joe Johnson. I think with a roster like that, they're a lot like, to reference a baseball team, the L.A. Dodgers. I think
Well,
they kind of had that.
they spent like them, but I don't think
Yeah.
they got the production they wanted for the money they spent.
Right, and the news that a few days old, but Brooke Lopez is going to miss some time with another foot injury. It's just kind of a recurring theme for him. Whether it's his knee, ankle, foot, it's kind of heartbreaking because he's shown that he can change the flow of games with his defense and his hook shots and his play in the paint. But once again, the Nets will be not at full strength to start the season, and the fact that they have Lionel Hollins as their coach could take some time getting used to.
But I think he's used to working with veteran guys, so I think they'll be fine on that front.
Right.
But they sort of put all their eggs in one basket and spending a lot of money trying to build something that directly countered Miami's style, and that obviously failed, and now they're left with the oldest team in the league, very little young talent. So I think they'll be on the decline for the next 3-4 years, and they're going to have to draft extremely well with later round picks, because it's not like they're going to be finishing in the lottery. They'll probably make the playoffs this year, but I can't imagine that's what they wanted when they went and spent all that money to acquire big name guys.
Right, and that's that makes it interesting. Who's going to be fighting for that. Transition. Who's going to be fighting for that third spot. I think the Knicks have that wrapped up.
Oh yeah, because Boston and Philadelphia will be awful again.
It's just kind of a process of elimination. But New York, like I was telling you, whenever you have Carmelo, he's got to just having him and him playing up to his potential. You're going to be in the playoff race,
Sure.
all the way through the season. And when someone like Phil Jackson, pretty much running the team.
Well, I don't know how much he'll be involved in the day-to-day operations.
Right, but
I can't imagine you'd want to be at this.
He certainly. Derek Fisher. I think the concern with him is that he'd be sort of a Phil Jackson puppet and be taking orders from him. And
Might be better that way, honestly.
Yeah, it could. But the Knicks lost Raymond Felton, who's now on Dallas. Tyson Chandler back on Dallas. So they're both back on Dallas. Jose Calderon, I think, was a really nice replacement for Felton, though.
Right.
Clee Anthony Early.
He could contribute this year.
From Wichita State, they drafted him. I thought that was a great job by their staff to draft him.
Yeah, this is gonna be a really bad defensive team, though.
Yeah.
Especially with, I know Chandler's obviously not been himself the last year or two, and he's missed a significant amount of time.
You do have Shumpert, though, who's known as a...
Yeah, but he's been susceptible to injury as well,
Yeah.
so who knows how much they'll get from him. So I would not pick this team to make the playoffs, especially with the East on the rise. We already, in the Southeast, we talked about 4 teams who have the potential to make it. I would say that Atlanta is probably a better team than the Knicks, and the only reason the Knicks would make the playoffs is because they take advantage of 2 bottom feeders in their own division.
Right. And it's definitely key for them to carry through with that, to make sure that they take care of business against Boston and Philadelphia.
Right.
So, and that leads us to, we don't really have to go into too much detail here with Boston and Philly, but
Two teams that drafted pretty well, I thought.
drafted pretty well. Boston drafting Marcus Smart and James Young.
It was hard to draft poorly in last year's draft because it was just so deep
Right.
at so many positions.
But, Brad Stevens is, honestly, I feel bad for him because I had a lot of respect for him when he was at Butler. And, I just don't like to see a coach of his credibility sort of go through what's looking to be another rebuilding season.
I mean,
and with the uncertainty of Rajon Rondo,
right?
You don't even know.
Well, I think he'll almost certainly. I think we both agree he'll almost certainly be gone
right
mid-season.
So that's yet another player that they'd have to replace. But Jeff Green definitely is someone that has really come on these past couple seasons. And
yeah, but he's just so inconsistent.
Yeah, he's inconsistent, but he has, that game against Miami,
sure,
where he hit the game-winning shot, he just has that kind of ability.
He can go off for 35, but then disappear in the next few games.
Right.
And as for Stevens, I heard this posed on another podcast I was listening to. Do you think if an offer comes up, let's say the Indiana job...
Oh, for sure he's gone.
No, I mean college.
Yeah.
Opens up, or like North Carolina. You think that... Yeah, because I tend to agree with that if one of those marquee jobs... Because honestly, those carry as much prestige as an NBA job.
Especially for an Indiana native, somebody who grew up a Hoosier fan.
Yeah.
He always said, or he didn't specifically say, but it was a rumor that if the Indiana job did become open while he was at Butler, that he would strongly consider it and probably decide to go there. But there's also the loyalty factor that he feels like, I've sort of had unfinished business in Boston, and I want to have at least a couple good seasons. But I always thought that he was more of a college coach than a pro coach. So I was honestly stunned when he decided to accept the Celtics offer.
It's difficult to say because we haven't really
right.
He hasn't had pieces to work with.
Right.
But maybe it partially probably depends on the development of the guys they drafted, Marcus Smart and James Young, who I think will both be pretty good NBA players, with Smart having all-star potential. Not necessarily perennial all-star, but...
Smart probably made a mistake in coming back for his sophomore season.
Senior season?
No, he stayed 2 years. Marcus Smart?
He was a senior.
No. He played 2 seasons for Oklahoma State, and...
Are you sure about that?
Yeah. Probably would have been the number 1 pick in 2013. Anthony Bennett was the number 1 pick there.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Whatever. Yeah. But yeah, he was still, what was he, number 4? Drafted number 4 this year. So yeah, for Coach Stevens' sake, I hope Boston's able to, at least have a better record than they did last season, which was 25 and 57.
They'll hover around that number.
Yeah, and then Philadelphia. Look, it's gonna be. We've talked about Boston possibly having a rebuilding season, or they'll definitely have a rebuilding season. But Philadelphia is. They're pretty much starting from scratch here.
They're on track to hold on to their crown as the worst team in the league.
What did they win? 18 games last year?
They even won 18?
18, 20, whatever.
It definitely wasn't more than 20.
Yeah, I'm surprised their coach was even asked back.
Well,
but you got Michael Carter-Williams is certainly one of those players who looks to have a very bright future.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I think that he looked a lot better because of the rookies that he was competing with for Rookie of the Year. I think he was probably one of the worst Rookie of the Years, maybe since Mike Miller. I love Mike Miller, but that was a pretty bad draft, just like couple drafts ago was pretty poor. I just think he gets stats almost by necessity.
Right.
Because if you look at his...
He's a triple-double machine, for sure, if you watch him at Syracuse.
Right, but if you look at his efficiency numbers, they're pretty poor. Like, he's at or below league average in a lot of places, and I understand he was a rookie last season with bad teammates. But I'm not as high on him as some people are.
But you got kind of the Twin Towers with, not twin in the literal sense, but you got Nerlens Noel, who will effectively be a rookie because he was out all of last season with a knee injury that he suffered while he was at Kentucky. And Joel Embiid, who they drafted with the second pick, I believe. Third pick. And so that should be interesting. That'll definitely cause me to tune into a few of their games to see how those two sort of gel in the paint.
Yeah,
so.
Another team that whatever their fate is, we won't know it for another 3 or 4
right,
years.
sort of like Orlando, but I think Orlando's in a better position
I agree.
than Philadelphia and Boston.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
So we'll move on to the Central Division. Certainly from my perspective, an interesting division.
I think from most people's perspective,
Yeah.
this is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with Cleveland and
Well, the 2-team race with Cleveland and Chicago should be pretty interesting.
yeah, I just won my streak.
Very professional. Yeah, obviously the major story is Cleveland, so there's not much else that needs to be said. Obviously, any team with LeBron James and Kevin Love is going to be one of the best teams in the league. The question is, will they have a similar situation to the first season of Miami where it takes 20 games or so for them to gel and figure... Really, it took Miami over a year to figure out how exactly they wanted to run the offense.
Right.
Because, I mean, I don't know if people remember that Miami's first season with the Big Three, they had a bunch of cumbersome old men weighing them down, and they sort of removed the center from the equation. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how long it takes for them to gel.
Going back to the whole gelling thing, there's only one of LeBron's former teammates while he was in Cleveland that's still on the team, and that's Anderson Varejao. So
he does have Mike Miller coming with him, though.
Right. Yeah, but I meant from his days in Cleveland.
That's probably for the best, though.
Yeah. So he doesn't have... I mean, yeah, he's going back to his former team and everything associated with that, but it's not like he's joining up with a bunch of his former Cleveland teammates.
No, there's no Antoine Jamison waiting.
Right. Or Mo Williams or
Delonte West,
Scott Pollard,
all the big
Sasha
names.
Pavlovich, Wally Zerbiak. Got to throw his name in there.
Go through all of them.
One of my favorites.
So yeah, they are. Yeah, I mean,
not to cut you off, but David Blatt. I thought that was. I mean, he's been a coach that's been just kind of waiting his turn. He's been in Israel and in Europe. He was the coach of the Russian national team, and he was a coach in the Israeli basketball league.
Yeah.
Someone whose teams have always scored a bunch of points, and it'll be interesting to see how his coaching style sort of translates to the NBA sort of structure.
Yeah, I think we'll be seeing a lot more of that in the coming years of looking internationally for coaches.
Right.
As we've seen with players,
Yeah.
the last 8 years or so, we've seen a massive influx of international players.
There was an Italian coach who was the Lakers assistant. I think he coached at AC Milan or somewhere, and so yeah, he's another one. But while David Blatt has Israeli citizenship, he was born in Massachusetts. Played, I believe he played for Harvard or Princeton, one of those Ivy League schools. So he does have that playing background. So yeah, obviously Cleveland will get most of the publicity during the season for obvious reasons, and we don't need to go into too much more detail.
Yeah, I think we can both agree that by the end of the season, they will probably be one of the top 3 teams in the league.
I think it's safe to say that. I put money on it.
Barring a Kevin Love injury, which obviously is not out of the realm of possibility because he's had troubles.
Definitely.
But I think we'll see a similar, like harkening back to before, the Heat's first season with a big 3, that I think it's very possible that the Bulls will finish with a better record because of, well, the type of coach they have, who pushes them every game. There's really no, like, taking games off. And because of possible that gelling time that you have to allow for,
Right.
for especially for LeBron and Love, who, I mean, obviously Love is used to being the one option.
LeBron, Love, and Kyrie Irving, who's been Cleveland's number 1 for first couple seasons.
Right, and he'll have to drop back to being the 3rd option for them.
But they're the new big 3
yeah,
in the league, so
I think a slightly weaker 3rd spoke of the wheel,
right.
but probably at this point in their careers a better 2. I mean, maybe Wade's first season as part of the Big 3, he was still at sort of like the end of his prime, but by the end, he didn't quite have it like he used to.
And mentioning Wade again, LeBron actually lost 10 pounds over the offseason, and Wade kind of did the same thing. They're both trying to get in better shape, and not to say that LeBron was in bad shape, but he's I believe he lost 20 pounds and then put 10 pounds of muscle on. So they're both obviously trying to. I mean, LeBron really doesn't have any worries concerned with prolonging his career or anything, but certainly Wade. There was a point there where I thought he had 1 or 2 more years left in him, just from various knee injuries or whatever. But luckily for LeBron, he's never had any.
He's not human.
Yeah, he's never had any injury concerns. I think he's had a few twisted ankles, maybe missed a game or 2 here and there because of injury, but he's been able to stay relatively injury-free. So moving on to Chicago.
Quite a big acquisition.
Right, yeah, Pau Gasol.
Obviously not his former self.
No.
But still quite significant. And I know people have been waiting for Derrick Rose for quite a while now. And I think
he's obviously not going to be what he once was. I just think, I just feel like he just doesn't totally trust his knees and his
he
legs.
certainly won't have the explosiveness that he used to have, which was kind of the linchpin of his game, was his ability to just break guys' ankles. But he'll still be a quality starter, maybe a fringe all-star.
I think if he's able to get back to a fringe all-star player, I think that's all credit to him, because for people who've had his injuries before, it's tough to be mentally accepting and willing to trust your body, and he's had well-documented struggles with trying to trust the doctor's advice and just do things. So let's hope he's able to get as close to what his former self was. But I mean, the Bulls, they drafted Doug McDermott, a local player from Creighton. I think he's gonna be able to be sort of a rotation guy. And you also have, they return, obviously, Joakim Noah, Defensive Player of the Year, his best season by far.
He's carried the load from the past 2 seasons.
His first All-Star appearance.
Was it really?
I think so.
Hmm.
And I mean, we're both Gator fans, but he's not well liked around the season. But if you're just looking at a player who just does everything and consistently brings it night in, night out, Joakim Noah is certainly someone to sort of model your game after. He's a double-double machine and just really plays basketball with a passion and
Cliche.
yeah.
He's got a lot of heart. But no, really, I mean, most of the cliches are true about him. He puts in extra effort that some guys in the NBA just don't want to put in on a nightly basis.
So it'll be interesting to see how Noah and Gasol sort of mesh together. I think that's been a common theme in this Eastern Conference preview of is how new additions will mesh with players who have been on the team for a few seasons.
I think that'll go perfectly smoothly, just because Powell can sort of play a little bit out of the paint and just knock down those like 15-footers.
Right.
I don't.
Which we're so accustomed to him hitting.
Yeah.
Over the course of his career.
So yeah, it should be a really interesting race between those two teams.
Now, would you make the case that those are the two best teams in the conference? Bulls and Cavs?
Yeah, I think that almost
I'd say
goes
so.
with that question. I mean, yeah, we discussed the Southeast, probably the deepest division in the East, but not necessarily. You don't have to have either of the top two teams to be the best division.
Right.
Because, as we'll see with the later teams in this division, there's quite a drop-off with the next few teams.
We were thinking before the unfortunate Paul George injury in the USA Basketball sort of warm-up game that it was going to be sort of a three-headed monster in this division. Unfortunately, Paul George will be out for the season, a broken leg.
And obviously moving Lance Stevenson.
Yeah, Lance Stevenson departing.
I just wonder where their offense is going to come from.
Yep. And especially if Roy Hibbert sort of reverts back to the way he played sort of midway through the playoffs, just total loss.
0-0.
Total loss of confidence and just really just didn't look like an NBA player out there, to be honest.
But the question is, will they drop behind Detroit, who's had some steady improvement in the last couple seasons?
And I think Stan Van Gundy was a brilliant hire, though.
Yeah, I mean, there's very few coaches who want more than him.
He's been sort of waiting his turn to get back in the league after that controversial firing from Orlando.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult for me. Do you think that they have the potential to make a run at like either 7 or 8 seed? Because I'm not sure that they're quite there yet.
Well, if we count off the teams, we got, in no particular order, we got Cleveland, Chicago, Miami, Washington, Toronto, Charlotte. That's 6 teams right there. And then you got sort of the Atlantas of the world, the Pistons, Brooklyn. If you want to throw New York in there.
And I'm going to throw a wild one in there, Milwaukee. Because they really...
Yeah, you've been high on them for...
Their roster is just so... It's just... When I look at it, it's just like... First of all, I think, how did a similar team to this win 15 games last year? Because I thought they were going to be better last year than they were. But with drafting Jabari Parker, who can come in and probably have a pretty good season this year, and
for trading for Jason Kidd.
Yeah, that was an interesting subplot to the offseason. But no, I mean they're young guys. So look at obviously the Greek Freak, who seems to be improving pretty rapidly every day.
We'll just say his first name, Giannis.
Yes. And then, like, obviously guys like Ilyasova, who had a really great season a couple of years ago, and Larry Sanders, who's kind of reputation for just kind of
Shot blocking. And
well, also having a little bit of an attitude problem.
Right.
But yeah, I think his defensive capabilities. It's really tempting for me to pick this team to make the playoffs. How do you feel about that?
I'm not as high on them as you might be. Certainly with Jabari Parker and Ilyasova, they're like I said. I mean, they're like a few of these teams like Boston and Philadelphia. I think they're a couple years away. Orlando. But like I said, I'm not as high on them as you are. But yeah,
it's very difficult.
But I think what did we mention?
No. I'm just saying the site that we're looking at is telling us that the Bucks picked Wiggins. Which is obviously an error. Sorry, it just caught me.
And there's been multiple errors on this.
Yeah,
we won't mention the site.
And we don't want to besmirch their name.
But
there's been some spelling errors and wrong names.
They're a well-known sports network from the New England area, so that's all we'll say. But
yeah, so it's. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna pick them to make the playoffs because it doesn't really matter either way.
Right.
Because they're not getting past
either Cleveland or Chicago.
And they're not gonna win. Maybe they'll win a game off of either of those teams.
So,
Probably not.
Good luck to those 7 and 8 seed teams. It'll say playoffs next to your name, but you really won't have much of a chance.
Unlike the Western Conference, where 7-8 seeds can be quite dangerous,
Right.
as we've seen the last.
And even if you're a 9 or 10 seed, you're not in the playoffs. But you would have definitely been a 4 or 5 seed in the East.
Yeah, obviously, Minnesota last year was a strong team.
Phoenix as well.
So do we want to do a rundown on
how
we think the rankings?
Yeah. Let's do a rundown. Top 8 teams. I'll give you mine, and then you can say yours. I'll say Cleveland will be the 1 seed. Chicago 2. I think Toronto will be the 3. I think Miami will be the 4. Washington 5.
Well, wait. Chicago can't be the 2 seed if they don't win the division.
They can. One of the top 3 seeds are from the.
This is embarrassing. I don't remember how it's done.
I know for sure. I know Toronto was the 3 seed last year, and they had the 3rd best record in the East. So.
Right, they won their division.
Yeah, they won their division. Well, that comes with it, though. Yeah, this is.
Well, we'll just name who we think the top 8 teams are.
Yeah.
Because that's.
Yeah. Yeah, we won't name
There's
seeds.
There's weird things like that you just forget.
So we have, and they're all different in every sport, so that makes it confusing. So we'll name the top 8 teams, no seeds or anything. For me, Cleveland, Chicago, Toronto, Miami, Washington. We'll go Charlotte. I'm going to throw New York in there. And I think Indiana's going to get it done as well.
Really?
So there's my top 8 teams. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Cleveland at 1. Even if they don't finish with the best record, they're still the best team in the conference. Chicago is the 2nd best team. Playoff rules notwithstanding. It might be a little homerism to put Miami as the 3rd best team, but I still think people are sort of discounting them a little bit too much. I mean, they could finish anywhere from 3rd seed to 6th seed, but I'll pick them as the 3rd best team in the conference. Probably Washington as the fourth best team. Well, it's sort of a toss-up between Washington and Toronto. You know what? I'm not. I'm going to pick Washington. Toronto is the fifth best team, followed by Charlotte, Brooklyn. See, it's very difficult to shoehorn Milwaukee in here, because then I'd have to say that
You'd be leaving out, teams like Indiana,
Atlanta.
Atlanta,
Well, I'm leaving Indiana out. They're not under consideration. I don't think.
Detroit. You're leaving them out.
Yeah. Screw it. I'm picking Milwaukee.
Hey, if you're right, that's a bold pick, and
Yeah.
it'll certainly surprise a lot of people. I mean, obviously, like we discussed, I mean, Milwaukee would have no chance against Cleveland or whoever the number one seed is. But for them to make the playoffs,
No,
after the
no,
season they had last year,
I can't pick them.
Yeah.
I really can't.
Yeah.
I'm thinking they're also gonna have to play Cleveland and Chicago a lot.
Right.
So I guess I'll pick Atlanta. I'll pick 4 teams out of the Southeast. And yeah, again, I'll run a little long there.
It's still not as long as the Eastern Conference playoff.
Well, no, the Western was the really long one.
Well, I mean, both were over an hour and 15 minutes at least.
Right.
But yeah, there's hopefully we provided you with enough wisdom and things of that nature to, and hopefully these predictions hold true.
Oh yeah, conference's top 2 teams are the top 2 seeds, even if they're in the same division.
Okay. So there's some clarification there. But yeah, there's our Eastern Conference regular season preview for the 2014-15 season, and we'll provide you with the Western Conference equivalent in the next podcast. Thanks for listening.